Everyone, you can go ahead and be seated. Hello and welcome everyone to another Peaceful Solutions Certification Training course, where we are training teachers to go out and teach the workplace manual to their workplace and to managers. And we are coming to the end of Lesson 8. So if you've been following us for the last month or so, we've been in Chapter 8, which is Management Leads with Character. And we are coming to a conclusion of this chapter, which brings us to the end of this unit. So tonight we want to do a recap of the chapter and remind us of the importance of it as we bring it to its conclusion, okay? But there's two words that I want you to keep in mind as we go through this class. The first one is mindset, and the second one is perspective. Those two things, keep that in your mind as we go through this lesson. Now I'm going to take us back to page 137 because I think it's very important when we're going in to teach the workplace manual into a business, a company, whether you're presenting it to the staff, managers, employees, CEOs, the superiors, whoever you might be presenting this to, you might ask yourself, why is there only one chapter dedicated to management? Management is so important and they control how the business runs. Why is there only one chapter? Well, if you go to page 137, and the beginning of that paragraph, it says, there's hundreds of books about management out in society, in the world today. Why would the Peaceful Solution make one as well? And they give us the answer here, and they said, the emphasis on character management is what this program is all about. So yes, there's hundreds of other programs all across the world that teach how to use proper management, different skills that you can use. But in the Peaceful Solution, we focus on character management. And the second paragraph, it says, everyone begins first by managing their own lives as individuals in a family and the workplace and in a society as a whole. And if someone was to say, well, if I'm just a manager, I can just skip to chapter 8. No. Even if you're a manager and you're taking the Peaceful Solution workplace course, you start at chapter 1. Regardless of if you're a staff, you've only been there a day, or you've been there for 20 years, and you're a manager, you're senior management. It's so important that you use the manual the way it was written and the way it was created to be used for the best impact and to get the most out of it. And that is why, because it starts with the individual in your lives. And that goes to your mindset and your perspective. It goes into your thoughts, and then you have to use it in your family life. You use it in your interactions with others. And then it ripples out as a society, and we'll see that later on in this class. But let's jump over to page 146, and I'm just going to briefly read over the points that were given throughout this lesson for management. Now on page 146, it says management is about leadership. And remember, we went over in the beginning of the overview of this lesson that a manager is another word for a leader. It's interchangeable. When somebody says I'm a manager, they're a leader of people. There's somebody that's an example that people look up to. And on point 1, it says successful managers are knowledgeable. And remember, in the acceptance unit, page 11, we learned that knowledge is power. As a manager, if you are knowledgeable in the tools that you are working with, if you are knowledgeable in your business, you have the power in that situation. And that doesn't mean you're controlling people, but it means you have the power of which direction that goes to. It's also important that if you're not in a management position, that if you are learning this, that you don't toss it aside, because you're still managing yourself, and you're still learning to one day manage other people, even if it's not something that's in your 5-year plan or your 20-year plan. At some point, you're going to need these skills, and they will be better accessible to you if you've already learned them than when you try to catch up on it later on. All right, so going on to page 147, it's number 2. Successful managers are observant. Successful managers are observant in all areas of their work environment. So that means that they're paying attention, careful attention to the staff's interactions with one another, the interaction that employees have with customers. Is it proper? Is it appropriate? Is it respectful? They're making sure that when things are filed, is it done properly or is it slothful? And that's why things get lost. They're observant of every single aspect. And some people confuse that with micromanaging, and it is absolutely not to be confused. A manager who's constantly checking up and making sure things are on check keeps you as the employee and the staff, keeps you on your toes. Because if somebody's not checking on us, we might fall behind and we might not even be aware that we're doing it because we get so comfortable in our job or our position. All right, going on to page 148, it's point number 3. Successful managers are decisive. In fact, making tough decisions is one of the main reasons for the position of a manager, and people look to you to decide the best course of action. And it's so important that managers are decisive, because if you're not, and you have 2 different groups of people that you're leading, and when they come to you at 9 a.m. in the morning and you lead them this way, and the 12 p.m. shift comes in and you give them a different direction, and at the end of the week, both teams have to come up with the same thing, they're not even going to be closely matched because you weren't decisive. You gave 2 different things about the exact same situation. Now, granted, if you get more information, then things change, and that's a separate situation. But if it's the exact same thing, you have to be decisive, because those that you are leading, 1, they'll lose trust in you, and 2, they're not really sure that you know what you're talking about. And if you have a manager or a staff who doesn't trust their management, then you don't have a team. You have a bunch of people who are hoping to accomplish the same thing, but they're not an actual team. All right, going on to page 149, it says successful managers train their employees. Employees who are well-trained and competent, and that word competent means skilled to do something successfully. Okay, so employees who are well-trained and skilled to do something successfully in their line of work will be an asset to your company and to you as their superior. And remember, we've been going over the last few weeks, as a manager, you should always be bringing out the best in every person that you work with. Yes, we all have things that we rub the wrong way, and we have things that irritate one another and annoy one another, but we should never do things that provoke that kind of reaction. If you have control of the situation and you know that putting these 2 people together will create friction, just because you're in the ability or the power or the authority to do so does not mean you should do it for your enjoyment, so that you can watch them go at it all day long. As management, you know that these 2 people should not be put on the same shift, that if they have weaker or stronger things, they should be paired with someone else who can help them to reach their full potential, not continue to hold them back. All right, on point number 5, it says successful managers are personable and approachable. A pleasant, personable personality puts you, the manager, in a better position to offer support and advice that could build greater communication and trust between you and your employees. And over the last week, if you live in the Texas area and if you're on the East Coast, you might still be going through the winter snowstorm that swept through us. And I really started thinking about this with the personal and approachable, because as management, that was your time to shine. If the people who work with you and your staff, if they don't have vehicles equipped to make it to work in those conditions, check in with them. Are you able to come to work? Is it a vehicle issue, or is it not, you don't feel comfortable walking on this surface? If it's a vehicle condition, then just let us know. We can work it out with you. We can make sure that you're able to come to work. We can make sure you're not missing, your job. You're not missing that income. It's not something that's hard for you. And if there's someone who's not really on top of things, check in with your staff. Have you checked your water? Do you have enough water on hand? Did you check this, make sure you're not going into the store and there's nothing left on the shelf? Checking in with them, showing that care and that concern, to making sure that, with that personable and you're approachable, they know they can share this with you. And it's not taking advantage, and it's not because you think they're incompetent. It's because you truly care about their well-being, and that goes a long way in a workplace. All right, going on to page 150. It's point number 6. Successful managers are active listeners. The active listener allows others to find solutions to their problems and support and encourages personal and professional growth. And that along goes with being personable and approachable, having where they can share you. Now, it's not realistic to say that every morning that every member of your staff, whether there be 5, 20, or 150, can come up to the manager and have a 30-minute discussion of what occurred on the weekend and how they barely made it to work. That's not logical. But when you're walking past someone and you say, hey, how you doing? How did it go this weekend? And they say, oh, not so great. Maybe at lunch, can I talk to you? I really have something I need to get off my chest. Having that open communication to where they can share so that it's not burdening them to hold them back from accomplishing the goal that your company really needs. And going back to helping your staff become an asset to your company and to you as a team leader. On page 152, we go into point number 7, which is successful managers mediate conflicts. Inevitably, conflicts will occur between coworkers. Strained relationships between employees account for 60 to 70% of unproductivity time and difficult situations. All right, now I want to flip back over because that brought to my mind on page 138. It's the last sentence on page 138 of the overview for this chapter. And this is what, when you get to the end of teaching managers in this chapter, this is what they should have the tools to do. Managers in this lesson will learn the importance of maintaining, 1, a positive moral character, so knowing what that is, developing it, maintaining it, so that they can handle their daily stress. Because it is so important that managers realize, and you understand that as representatives of the Peaceful Solution, that we understand your stress load is so much higher than your staff. It is. And the superior manager over you has even more stress. And then the senior manager has more stress. And the CEO or the cabinet members of that company have more stress because they're making sure that all of these people keep a job. And they have the money flow to make sure you get paid when you come to work, and there's not an IOU sitting on your desk when you come. There's so many people that pay attention and keep these things going. All right, it says that they also should learn how to handle unexpected challenges, serving as an example to those who look to them for instruction and support. So you're being that example to them. And in order to be an example, you have to know what you should be doing. All right, so we're going to go to page 154, moving along in our points. Point number 8, successful managers correct to learn. Correction at its best is helpful and promotes understanding and growth. As an effective manager, one of your goals should be to help employees improve rather than to insult or discourage them from growing. And if I remember correctly, this is the chapter or the point where we talked about the sandwich method, right? Where you lay out, and I love the example that Tana gave a few weeks ago where you explain to them, like, you're always so organized and you're always so early on time and you're set. But can we maybe keep in mind that we don't close up until after 5:30 or whatever time that you close? We don't start packing our things away. And that example stayed with me, and it was on my mind, and I started thinking about it in my workplace and in places I volunteered over the years. And I started thinking about how the sandwich method works and how if as a manager you used it and it would not work for you. And I started thinking about that because every tool that the Peaceful Solution presents us with works. But the only way it works is if every member of your staff is practicing positive moral character. So I want you to consider, same example. We go up, we point out to someone, you're always organized, you're so organized, like I absolutely love when I have to come to you for something because your desk is always organized, you reach right for it, I don't have to wait. But keep in mind, that we don't want to close up. And she's totally cool with that. Like, yeah, absolutely, I didn't even notice. Like, I thought I had to be out of the building by 5:30. Not that I shouldn't stop packing up. Like, that's cool, I can do that. But my coworker who's over here overheard her. And then she comes over to me and she says, I have a friend who was in one of those manager meetings, and that's a load of bull because they tell them to tell you that. She doesn't actually think you're organized. She really didn't even notice you were on time. She just had to say something nice so that when she told you something to correct you, that you felt like she was patting you on the back. But she didn't really mean anything. So now I'm like, well, now I'm second guessing everything my manager's ever said to me because now she's not genuine. Now I don't believe what she's saying. But then somebody over here who overheard her is like, she thinks she's so sly because she didn't even mean for her to do it because she doesn't even pack up till 5:30. I was packing up at 5:25 yesterday, and she looked at me, and she's telling her because she thinks if I overhear her that I'm going to start doing better. Well, if she has a problem with me, she can walk herself over and tell me right here. She does not have to tell somebody else. Do you think the sandwich method would be very productive in that workplace? No. That is why mindset, perspective is so important. When somebody is coming to you to point something out, even if you feel like it is the cheesiest line you have ever heard, take it as being genuine. Because if you put that thought in your mind that they're genuinely trying to help you, they're trying to, help us to grow, to become an asset in our community, then it works. But it all goes back to our mindset. And it's just something I really thought about because I was like, it wouldn't work. But it always works. And if we're teaching this, it's important that we always have a plan to be able to explain that to people. That, okay, I tried this, it didn't work. Was every single member in your staff practicing the moral character? Are they aware? In their actions, can you see they're practicing it in their thoughts? And if not, then we got to start all over again. And it's just, you just keep going until it's a peaceful work environment. All right, going on to page 155, point number 9. It says successful managers encourage a team approach. So they're encouraging one another to be involved. If you know the strengths or you know not the weaknesses, but the things that people are insecure about that holds them back from reaching out, give them that time to grow. But as managers, as team leaders, it is your job to push them. Not to push them until they're nervous and they never want to show up to work again, but pair them with someone that complements them well so that they can grow and they can learn together. Because an employee can never become an asset and reach the potential if you allow them to stay comfortable where they are. Slowly and gradually, and as managers, you spend time with your employees. You'll know when they're comfortable with going forth, but always encouraging and motivating them to have that team approach. And if somebody is always working on their own, you have to integrate them into the team. Because when something occurs and somebody's out that day, they're going to be a fish out of water because they're not going to know how to integrate themselves into the work. All right, going on to point number 10. It says successful managers learn to delegate, which ties right in with point number 11. Successful managers take the initiative. They see a problem and they take the initiative to try to fix it. Or if you don't know how to fix it, taking the initiative to reach out to your staff who's on the ground level. What are some things that you see are an issue? What are some things that you feel could be beneficial if we improved? And then taking that and growing with that. On page 157 is point number 12. Successful managers must, and I underline that word must, acknowledge and then make a plan to change unacceptable behaviors. Again, leading by example. And then point on page 159, point 13, successful managers have a serving attitude. A leader should not have the mentality of ruling over others, quite the contrary. A successful leader will go out of his or her way to determine the needs of others and to show that care and concern. And finally, bringing us to point 14, which is where we concluded last week, successful managers demonstrate positive character traits. Okay, and I reference pages 12 to 13 because in this book, that's where we go over it. So if you were teaching this in a group session of managers or of a workplace, team leaders, I would encourage you to go back to page 12 and 13 and go over each point individually. Self-control, respect, patience, educated. Go through every single point and have them share. Do you feel that this is something that maybe you were lacking before at the beginning of chapter 1, but by chapter 8, where do you feel you've improved? How have you used this trait in your work area? And get them to be able to connect it, because from chapter 1 to chapter 8, if they've been following along diligently, they should be able to start piecing those puzzle pieces together on their own. All right, now I want to leave you with a quote that we have, I believe it was from the intermediate series in the respect unit, but it's the 3 C's of respect. And it's something that's so important when dealing with management and to teaching them, is that in every decision that you make, you should take the 3 C's and have that on your mind, which is to have care, concern, and consideration. So when you're talking to your staff, when you're talking to your superiors, you're always having that on your mind. What I'm saying, what I'm doing, what I'm thinking. Does it show care, concern, and consideration for everyone involved? All right, so I told you we were going to talk a little bit about mindset and perspective. So that's what we're going to go into now. All right, so I have some do's and don'ts. Don't expect everyone to want to be the best version of themselves, because it's not reality. Some people are totally chill with who they are. And, it's take me as I am. This is who I am. If I'm not a fit for you, then I can leave. That's fine. As management, you have to understand that some people you're never going to give up on your staff, ever. You're always going to teach. You're always going to motivate. You're always going to encourage. But you have to also understand that some people aren't going to want to, and you can't force change. Somebody has to want and to desire to change and adjust their behavior and their mindset. Another don't. Don't think that the past and the present is set in stone. Whether it be your past as a manager, a mistake that you made with your staff, that you feel nervous to ever have to make those kinds of decisions again because it went really bad the last time you did. Don't think that's set in stone as a manager. This is the only way you can manage, because you can grow, you can change, and you can learn. When your ideas are shot down or pushed aside, don't let that cause you to stop sharing your ideas. And don't let it to cause an inner dialogue in your mind that it's stupid, nobody would care anyway. Or it's just me, I'm a lowly staff person, why would anybody care what I think? And I recently, over the last few months, been working on a project with a few people, and we're creating ideas. And as we go through them, we try to think of every aspect. So when it gets to the people above us, they don't have any more questions. So we all read through it, and we make sure we answer, okay, because you know the team leaders that you work with. So we're like, she's going to have these questions, she's going to have this question, and she's going to want to know about this. So we answered all of the questions, we dotted our I's, we crossed our T's. We were so confident that we were done. Until we got our email back that said, great work, but did you consider this? Did you take into account this? Maybe we need a little bit more details about this. Have you considered adding these people? And I realized that even though you think you've completely got confidence that you have it, there's always more to learn. And as you go through that, the next time you have to turn in a project, you're going to consider everything that they just gave you the last 10 times. And you learn from that and you grow. All right, so now some do's. Try your best every day and try to have a great day, regardless of the situation. Set it in your mind to have a great day. Do treat every day as a new day and a new experience. Don't let yesterday drag into today. Now, here's another example. When your supervisor who is overwhelmed, they have a load of things to do, they just walked out of a management meeting, they probably got ran through the ringer because they had to account for something that went wrong last week. They just got 10 more jobs that have to be done. And they walk out, and I'm just waiting for them to give me approval because I can't move on to my next task until they give me approval. So they walk out, and I say, hey, I need your approval for, and that's it, because I am the first person they seen when they walked out that meeting. And you just sit there, and you wait, and when they're finished, then you say, well, I just needed your approval because it's something that you set in order for me to do. So if I knew you were going to have that kind of mood, I would have just done it anyways and not waited for you the last 20 minutes. I don't know that you're going to have a job very long after that. But that might be what you're feeling like saying. But an alternative response would be, and something to keep in mind, that gives you a totally different outcome is, oh my, it sounds like you've had a really tough morning. I just needed your approval on this. I'm sorry that it's adding to your level of stress, or I'm sorry that it's adding to what you're already going through. But if you could give me this, then I'll go on, I can get on finished with what I'm doing. But if there's anything you need, just let me know. I'm totally willing to help. You just let me know if you need something. And even if they're overwhelmed, even if they're stressed, even if they're just like, is she serious right now? You just relieve them because now they know that, one, it didn't create an argument, and two, they know their staff has their back. And that's the most important thing when it comes to management, is that management has your staff's back and your staff has to have your back. That's how a team works. All right, now I came up with a few examples here that I want to share with you of employees, because their ideas were presented, they became an asset and they grew their company. Now, the first example here is Swan Vesta, which is the Matchbox millionaire. It says in the early 1900s, a factory worker and the company, he went to the senior management and he told them that he had an idea that could save their company millions of pounds of product cost. He was ignored, with the management believing that a lowly factory worker could have no such idea of value. The idea was to put the sandpaper strike on only one side of the matchbox rather than both. As any Swan matchbox will now prove, the idea worked and the business saved millions of dollars. All right, we're going to go right into the next one, which is Frito-Lay Flamin' Hot chips. Okay, these have been around, I thought, forever, but apparently only since the 80s. All right, so what occurred is there was a janitor who worked in this company, and the owner of Frito-Lay, he started a thing that said for employees to act like an owner. So if you have any idea to build the business, turn it in and submit it. So there was a janitor, he made $4 an hour, which is more than he ever made in his entire life. It says here, but they didn't think a great idea could come from a janitor. He sweeps and mops the floor. What idea could he have? So what he did is he went home, he bought a bag of regular Cheetos, went home, made his own Mexican-style spices, threw them in a bag, brought them to work, and just sent it in the mail to the CEO. The CEO tried it, went to him, told him to put his mop away because he was now the person who's going to be producing a new thing at Frito-Lay called Cheetos Flamin' Hot. So this janitor who barely had a fourth grade education, nobody thought he had ideas of value. He created an entirely new product, which made the company millions of dollars. All right, going on to the next one, which is Amazon Optimum Prime. How many people do you know today that does not have Amazon Prime? Pretty much everybody, which no thanks to COVID, there is no 2-day shipping anymore, but while it lasted, it was really nice. All right, so that's another one. Part of Amazon's core identity is Prime, and it was actually created by a team of employees that thought that their customers would pay more to be a part of an exclusive members-only club where you can get 2-day shipping. So that's something that was actually created in the lower department of Amazon that made its way up, and now it's something that's made the company over $19 million every year. All right, next one is Colonel Sanders. It says, before Sanders found success with his recipe of Kentucky Fried Chicken, which if you have not heard about that, you've not been to America because it's one of the most well-known staples of America. It said he didn't even try it until he was 62 years old. But what's most incredible about Sanders' story is his chicken recipe is that it wasn't until the 1,010th time. He tried this recipe over 1,000 different ways, 1,000 different times, before he found somebody who actually wanted to try it and invest in his company. And he didn't even start till he was 62. So if you haven't figured out what you're doing in your life and you're working in your workplace and you're not thinking you have any ideas, keep working at it, keep generating it, and keep trying, because he was 62 and he made something that's way outlived him. All right, and our last one here I want to share with you is Steve Jobs and Apple. How many of you know anybody who does not own an Apple product outside of our Samsung friends that does not own an Apple product? Everybody at one point has used or operated an Apple product. It said that Steve Jobs and Apple's failure is different because Steve Jobs started at that company, and then he was fired and removed from that company. Right before they went into bankruptcy, they brought him back, and he created the idea of an iPod and the phones, and now that's the staple of Apple. Everybody has an Apple product. But it said, the one I want to leave you with, it says, think how different the tech world would be today if Steve Jobs had let his failure get the best of him. No wonder in 2005, Steve Jobs said, I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. So even when really bad things occur in our workplace, in our situations, that we think we can't come back from it, every failure is just something to learn, grow, and mature, and move on past. And I love the examples because there are things that you see all the time, but I had no idea where any of these ideas from. One of them came from a janitor. One of them came from a company where they looked down on their lowly people who were in their staffs, but they created something that completely changed the way the company made business, and they made $19 million a year. So as management, as people who are teaching this, encourage your staff to turn in their ideas. Encourage management to have an open mind, because you never know by having that open line of communication what you can actually create that can change the world in a positive way. And with this, I'll turn it over to the next teacher.
Great evening, everyone. I hope everyone's having an excellent week. And I want to open up with a quote. And I'm hoping for next time to bring it to you on a slide, because I know most people are visual. But the author of this quote is unknown because there's different variations of it. It says, if you're not willing to learn, no one can help you. If you are determined to learn, no one can stop you. Okay? Because, like Ms. Brittany was saying, mindset and perspective is everything. And the attitude that you develop from your mindset and from the perspective with which you look at things is everything. Now, I'm able to easily move from management to employees to management. I've had the great opportunity to be in both, okay? But you know how I remember once going to a training, and it was for special education, for teachers to learn how to teach special education students. And they were giving great strategies. And in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, well, what's wrong with using these strategies like for regular students, with students who don't have, disabilities? And it just kept, back there. And then during one of the breaks, I asked the trainer, I said, would you say there's anything wrong with implementing these strategies just with regular students? And she looked at me like if I had said something foreign, and she said, no. She said, you're the first person that ever asked that. And she said, but no, you're right. I mean, if it's great enough to help students who might have some trouble learning, it's great enough for anybody, right? So the peaceful solution teaches, like she said, the last chapter is for managers. But I want all of us to always have, when we're training staff, to make this point and say, this is great enough. These are strategies that all of us should know, learn, and implement, whether we're management or we're employees. Because as employees, we should have hopes to one day be management, I know, like she was saying, a lot of people are comfortable in who they are, and that's okay. But you want to, in your staff, you want to make them feel that, if they successfully implement all these managerial skills, that they can be supervisors, right? You want to be, for people to, you want to give them that opportunity to grow. And that's the point. As managers, we should always continue to motivate, inspire, and teach, okay? And as employees, if we are determined to learn, then it shouldn't matter what kind of supervisor we have, we're going to be striving to learn and do our job well. And one of the things that when we teach this program, we have to allow people to, we have to say it so that people realize, we have to get away from that mentality of us against them, because it's not that way. A company cannot be that way if you want to be successful. It's not employees against managers or managers against employees. It's not that way. You're a team, and the supervisors depend on the staff to do their job well so that everything can run well in that company. It doesn't matter how big or how small that company is. So I did want to touch on a couple of scenarios, and then before I go to, I do have a very powerful testimony that I do want to share with you as part of our closing of this chapter. So it says, an employee is consistently late for work, and this is optional. It's on page 161. I'm reading on from page 161. It's optional. And when you're teaching this, you want to pick a couple of scenarios. And one of the times that I was teaching this manual, I was emphasizing that we got to be careful sometimes because, sometimes people think when you're creating a scenario, you're like, was she talking about me? I bet the supervisor said that I did that. So sometimes, it does occur, but you also want to let them know, all these scenarios are for our learning. And sometimes we're going to mention scenarios that are not here because as Peaceful Solution instructors, you do want to share. When you go out there and teach, and the things that supervisors might share with you, or even staff that might share with you, you know what, I started doing that, and I've been very successful, or I've been, doing better in this area. You want to be able to share that. So it says, number one, it says, an employee is consistently late for work. Which positive character traits would you need to handle this in a positive way? Briefly explain how you would resolve this issue. So she was saying, as managers, you have a responsibility to point it out, because it's not just like, well, she's late, we'll dock it off her pay. It creates a whole different kind of situation at work. If a person is responsible for a certain thing and she's consistently late, it can create a situation with a whole department. So obviously, as a manager, as a supervisor, you've got to touch on that. So what character traits does the supervisor need to handle this situation? Well, definitely self-control, right? Because you want to be able to point out things in a way where you're not disrespectful, and you control, even if that morning something might have occurred and that's why you're having to bring it up that morning, you want to be practicing self-control, respect, right? And allow the employee to express the reasons why they're late. And then you also want to bring up possible solutions to that situation. Now, I'm also going to share something. Sometimes in one mindset that can affect a manager negatively is, well, I shouldn't have to tell them that, or I shouldn't have to teach them that. Because a lot of times in our mind, it might be something so basic that you think, well, they should know that already, shouldn't they? But the problem with that is that you have to remember, when we come to the peaceful solution and we're training people in the peaceful solution, you have to remind them, that all of us have done what we know to do, okay? And the peaceful solution is teaching us a new way and a better way to do things. And so you have to remind people that sometimes you might have to go a little bit out of your way to teach something, even if in your mind you think that person should already know. You can't assume they know, and you can't assume that they have thought of a solution either, okay? So these are the things that as managers and supervisors need to be on the forefront of your mind when dealing with situations with your employees, okay? So these scenarios are really great. I'm not going to go over all of them, but one of the things that I wanted to bring up, another peaceful solution instructor sent me, she had asked about these scenarios, and she sent me some ideas. And I was laughing because we're truly a team, in the peaceful solution, the instructor, we're a team. And so I thought, this is so, wonderful that she thought, hey, I collected these, so, have them share. And I thought, this is part of what makes a team successful. You're not just thinking about what you need, okay? You're thinking about what might help your team. And I cannot stress enough, she was saying, she pointed out, managers train their employees, right? So when you're training your employees, and if you're not consistent in your instructions, then, along the way, you're going to create a mess, right? And employees are confused, and they don't know what to do, and so it creates a whole different situation. When she was covering number 6, active listeners, I don't think at times that we might think of how powerful it truly is to actively listen to someone. Okay, I work in a city office, and I had a worker come up, and I could hear in his voice such distress. Okay, I could tell that he, possibly felt overwhelmed. I don't know, because he wasn't, but I could hear it in his voice. And so I said, sir, do you want to tell me what I can do to help you, accomplish that job, do that job? And he paused, for just a couple seconds. And you could hear the relief in his voice when he said, no, it's okay, I got it. So you could tell that in that moment, he just needed someone to realize, you know what, I feel like I'm sinking here. And when I told him, what can I do to help you do that work? You know, he just realized, you know what, I'm not alone. Who knows what he was thinking, right? But I think he probably thought, you know what, I'm not alone in this. I can get help if I need it. And he's like, no, I got it, you know? So actively listening to somebody can mean all the difference in the world. So we've got to learn, whether we're management or we're employees, because this was just, you know, a fellow employee. I mean, we can really make a difference when we practice these techniques. And like she said, you know, the only way the peaceful solution does not work is if you're not using it. You know, and I tell people everywhere I go, and I train them, I said, you know, if I could share all the testimonials that I have, that I've seen people's lives completely turn around just by simply implementing, you know, some of these techniques in their lives, I mean, I could talk to you all day and all night, okay? So it really does work, but we got to implement it. We got to constantly be studying up. When we have a problem, let's pull out the books. Let's not think, you know, because these books should not sit on our shelves, okay? Every day we should be pulling a different manual and really studying, because let me tell you, situations are going to come up, and if all this knowledge is in here, you're going to remind yourself, and you're going to be able to better handle anything that comes your way, no matter how demanding or stressing it can be, because things do occur, and they do create stress. But when you have the solutions in front of you, there's no reason why, you know, we're you know, feeling like there's no answers or there's no possible peaceful solutions. They are, and they're in the tips of our hands. And that's what, as teachers, we always have to go and make sure people know that. You know, you want to keep this manual with you, okay? I often quote out of different manuals, because there's different things come into my mind. I have the quote here that comes from the parenting manual. And it says, no child should ever feel, why do you only see the wrong that I do? That's in the parenting manual. And I've changed it a little bit, and I say, no one should ever feel, why does she or he only see the wrong that I do? And none of us as supervisors should only see what an employee does not do or what they don't do well. You see? So again, we go back to the mindset and perspective that all of us as peaceful solution instructors need to have, so that when we go out there and teach, we remind people, your mindset and your perspective is going to determine everything and how you handle all things. And Brittany said something very important, and I really like what she said. You know, even if for a moment you think, I don't think she's serious, or I don't think she's genuine, or she's just saying that, okay? We need to really train our mind. That's thinking negatively. That's a negative thought. If we think somebody's saying something to us and they're not genuine, that's a negative thought. And we need to replace it by, no, she wouldn't tell me that if it weren't true. That's what that thought needs to be replaced with. Because see, even if the person was not genuine, that's on them. If you believe the compliment or that you know, whatever was said to you in a great way, if you believe it, you're going to act on it. So don't worry if the person was genuine or not. But see, we go back, mindset and perspective, negativity and what we allow our mind to carry through. Now, I also want to stress something. Successful managers have a serving attitude. I also want to stress that we have to recognize one thing. And I wanted to get more, what do you call it? Percentages. So I was looking through. I wanted to bring out how many people are truly confident in themselves. Okay? And I was going to gather from different sources so that I could, the probability and statistics, right? I wanted to get some statistics for you. But because I only got it from one source, I didn't feel comfortable sharing it. So, but it varies. There's several. but it's a very low number of people who actually consider themselves confident and able, okay? Now, that comes from all of our interactions, how we grew up, how we were raised. All of those things influence how confident we are as individuals. And of course, how confident we are, it covers all all areas of your life. How you act as a parent, how you act as a brother, as a sister, how you act at school, how you act at work, how you are as a supervisor, as an employee. All of that is affected by the way we were raised or how confident we are or we are not. So as managers and supervisors, one of the things that I always stress, you must learn how to encourage and build. We must. As supervisors, we must learn how to motivate, inspire, and build. Because a lot of people didn't have that. They didn't develop that growing up. And that's one of the things that I wanted to mention, how sometimes they're like, well, I shouldn't have to teach this person that. Like their mom and dad should have taught them that. Well, possibly. But they're working for your company now, and the more confidence they have in themselves, the better job they're going to do for you and to serve your customers, okay? So don't see it as a manager or supervisor. Don't see it as that's not my job. It is your job to build up your staff so that they feel confident in doing the job you have hired them to do, okay? So, and that comes also with our attitude when we correct, okay? If we correct always with the 3 C's, care, concern, and consideration, then you'll see your employees quickly develop that confidence, okay? Now, I'm not just saying this because my supervisor is here, okay? But she's really great, okay? She's really great at correcting and pointing out, okay? I don't feel like I mess up daily, more than once. But I don't feel like, I don't want to tell her I made that mistake. I don't want to go in there and tell her that I just forgot how to do that. I don't feel that way. I walk in there and I said, ma'am, I messed up. And sometimes it's a joke. She will tell me, like, what did you do now? And we'll laugh, and she'll tell me how to do it, the right way. Or she'll say, okay, well, write it up and go do this. And, she always guides and directs so that we can fix the problem. But I never feel intimidated, like I can't go to her, And so none of us should feel like that, okay? So as supervisors, it's part of our job to be approachable, like the manual says, okay? But as employees, another thing we have to remember all the time, that if we're scared of our supervisor, that's still not an excuse not to go tell them, I messed up, okay? Because whatever we messed up in has to be corrected. Because remember that our jobs affect other people, okay? So we've got to remember these things. We cannot use the excuse that, well, she's not practicing the peaceful solution, or he's not practicing the peaceful solution, so I'm not going to. We can't, that can never be our mindset, okay? Because with that, I really would like to share this testimony, because it was very interesting the way this came about. I was teaching the Building Moral Excellence, and it was to parents, okay? They were being referred by CPS. Now, all of them came for all sorts of different reasons. So this couple would show up once a week. And so it was a man and his wife. So the man never spoke, okay? So it was one of the, like, nothing. He would not utter one word. I mean, it was to the point where I thought, I don't know if he can speak. Okay, like that's it. I mean, not one word, not one comment. I never heard him speak to his wife, nothing. Okay, so about 4 weeks into the program, might have been 4 or 5 weeks, we had, he comes in and he say, "Good afternoon, ma'am." I thought, oh, he does speak, okay? So I said, "Oh, great afternoon." So he sat down with his wife, and other people started coming in. That was a large group. I had about 20 people in that class. So he said, "Ma'am, can I share something?" I'm like, wow. He went from not talking to now he wants to share. I said, sure. And then, I always become a little wary because you don't know what people are going to say, right? And I said, sure. And so he says, okay, so last week you said that this week you were going to teach us how to set our minds in advance, how to prepare, and that you didn't mean that we should be ready like with a quick remark, that you were really going to go into depth about what it meant to set your mind in advance. He goes, and, you always said, you said, I'm really going to go into detail and I'm going to give you several steps. And he goes, so I couldn't wait for this class today. He goes, but all I kept thinking about when you were saying that, I was thinking about my boss at work. He goes, I don't know if you know why my wife and I are here, but we were sent here for grief counseling. It was because a few months ago, we lost our baby to sudden infant death syndrome. And I said, well, I didn't know. And I said, but I'm very sorry for your loss. And then he said, well, a year ago, he goes, I got hit by a truck. He goes, when this occurred with our baby, he goes, I was already going into a depression, and I struggled to get up every morning. He goes, and I had anxiety attacks. He goes, then this occurred with our baby. He goes, and then they gave me extra medications. He goes, so it's really difficult for me to wake up every morning and go to work. He goes, so I work at a shop, and my supervisor is always with his cup of coffee right by the entrance door where we all have to go in through. He goes, and so he would walk with a small limp. He goes, so every day, as I'm walking towards him, he says, wow, you're walking slower today than you were yesterday. And the following day, he'll say, wow, you didn't even get to brush your hair to come to work? And he goes, and it's a different thing every morning. He goes, to where I already dread, what he's going to say. He goes, and I want to tell him, do you know the struggle that I go through to get out of bed? He goes, but then I feel like I shouldn't have to tell him that. And I said, well, yes. I understand what you're saying. We shouldn't have to tell people what we're going through so they can have empathy for us or for them to be caring and considerate. I said, so I understand. He said, but when, after I left class, he goes, I said to myself, you know what, tomorrow morning, I'm not going to give him the opportunity to say anything. I'm going to walk in there and I'm just going to say, great morning, and I'm going to go past him and then I'm going to go straight to my area. He goes, so I did. He goes, as soon as I was walking up, he goes, I could tell he was ready. So I said, hey, how are you doing this morning? Great morning to you. I'm going to go get coffee. And I went straight. He didn't say anything. He goes, and so I went and I said, oh, he's going to come my way. I know he's going to come my way. And he was getting his coffee ready to go to his little area. And so then he goes, sure enough. He goes, as I turned, he was right there, the supervisor. And he said, hey. I said, yes. He said, why did you react like that? React like how? You walked in, you didn't even let me talk. You said, great morning. And he's like, oh, he goes, and then he interrupted me. He's like, is it those classes that you're going to every day, like every week? Because he had to let him out early so he could go to the classes. So he was aware that he was going to these classes. Is it those classes? He's like, yes. He goes, oh, well, you're doing a great job. When you come next week, can you teach me whatever you learned? And, when we all laughed, and we said, well, that's great. He said, yes. But here's the other thing that, see how he was learning to build a moral excellence, impacted his work life. But what we didn't know, it was a cycle, because he said, I don't know what started first. He goes, I don't know if I developed this attitude back at home, took it to work, or it started at work because I felt so stressed and brought it home. He goes, because you can ask my wife. He goes, I wasn't very pleasant. And the lady's going like this, right? And she looks at him and says, can I? He says, yeah, go ahead. And she says, we were like, the children were like, oh, Daddy's coming home. Because they were already expecting him to come in with a bad mood or complain. So it was like a little cycle, It was hard for him to wake up and go to work. But then when he came home, whatever aggravated him at work, he was bringing it home. And then whatever was going wrong home, he was taking it to work the next day. So it became a cycle for him, okay? So I'm saying this because on page 163, it says a few final thoughts. Now that you have completed your study of developing positive character in the workplace, you have gained an education in character development that can improve all aspects of your life. So as Peaceful Solution instructors, we know this is true because you know that your character impacts every area of your life. It impacts you as a mom, as a dad, as a sibling, where if you're going to school, if you're going to work, it's going to impact every aspect of your life. So this man who was going through some terrible things in his personal life, and it was impacting his work because he hated to get up in the mornings, okay? But I've got to tell you, this man completed the program with his wife, and by the end of this program, it was 17 weeks, he was off all his medications, okay? I mean, that's how powerful his testimony was to me. Because as an instructor, to have one of your students tell you, I no longer suffer from anxiety, I no longer suffer from depression, I get up, and the wife said, it's like, ma'am, he wakes up before everybody else, he puts the coffee pot on, he's like, he goes, he's a different man. I don't even recognize him. And I was like, well, I didn't even recognize him. He didn't speak, and then one day he wants to teach the class. So it's that powerful that if we truly implement these concepts, all of us as Peaceful Solution instructors, when you stand before a forum, you're going to do it boldly, confidently, that this is going to change their lives. And they're going to believe you because you're going to share with them how much it's changed your life and how you use this every day. That's why it is very important that as instructors, we make this personal. Because it's very different when you're just sharing something from a book and when you share how you apply this in your everyday life to make your day a successful day. I want to finish up. Remember that developing positive moral character in the workplace is just as important as in our schools and our homes. In fact, anywhere people live, learn, or work together requires that we develop and consistently practice and maintain a positive moral character. Only then can we work in a peaceful environment, build trust, and develop a successful team dedicated to the best interest of our employment experience. Please share your successes with others and encourage them to invest in their most valuable asset, their character. Visit our website, www.peacefulsolution.org, to learn so much more of what the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program offers that you and others, that the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program offers that you and others you care about can benefit from. We have to remember, making the right choice, what does that mean? It means you're going to make a choice that does not hurt you or others. And hurt is not always a physical thing. Okay, we can, feelings can get hurt if we're not careful with our words. Okay, if we are not mindful of our gestures, rolling our eyes when someone's giving an instruction or things like that, then we might, do it out of just impulse. But if we're mindful of these, that can seem like small things, it can create a whole different environment when you start practicing these techniques. Okay, so I just want to close with a quote that I always would tell my students, okay? Make today and make this week a great week ahead, on purpose and with purpose. Thank you for joining us this week, and please stand. We'll see you next week, okay?